Yeah, we're doing this event for women. It is called the Unabridged Woman, Finding Wholeness in the Broken. This event is very near and dear to my heart, although I haven't really been able to do much with it since COVID has happened. But we're trying this online event, which is the first time we're doing it. So I'm sorry if there's little technical difficulties at points, but we are. Oh, hi, Danique. Yeah, we're really excited. And I'm really glad that you guys are joining us, and it should be a lot of fun. I hope you guys have a great time and that you really get something out of this because it's something that I think is really important because a lot of women don't really take a lot of time to understand what they're going through and how to overcome those obstacles because they're so busy with just everyday life and taking care of other people. And so I know that it's really important for us as individuals to really heal from our own wounds and to understand the things that are going on in our hearts and our minds in order to better serve others. So as we start, I just wanted to remind you guys that there is going to be a Q&A at the end of the program. You can text your questions to the number that's on the Instagram post called Submit Your Questions, or you can put it in the chat in YouTube. So feel free to send us your questions for Vanessa Quintana, Dr. Vanessa Quintana, and let us know what you think. How do you feel about this event? What are the thoughts that are going through your head? We want to know things that can apply to your life that can maybe help you. So stay tuned for the Q&A after the keynote speech. And now I'm going to introduce our first participant, Elise Harboldt. Hi.
Hi,
Hey, Elise, how are you doing?
doing great. Thank you so much for the chance to be here.
Yeah, so before you start, I just wanted to read your little bio so that people can know more about you and what you're up to. So Elise Horbolt is a nurse with a background in mental health and wellness. She is particularly interested in how people can heal from trauma and toxic thinking. She is currently a theology student focusing on the connection between good theology and mental health. So thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to hear your testimony.
Thanks. So, I want to briefly share about my experience with recovering from eating disorders and dealing with body image issues. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about practical tips for body image. Whether you have an eating disorder or not, I think a lot of women struggle with body image, and also just a little bit about shame and where do we get our sense of value. I'm asking that question. So, my story briefly, when I was a preteen, I was about 12 years old. I started getting very self conscious about my weight. I was quite thin at the time, but as we all know, the media is full of really unrealistic expectations about women's bodies. So I had internalized that growing up. I also had friends who were conscious about their weight. A lot of my friends were shorter than I was, and so they were smaller than I was, and I wanted to be small like they were. But I think the core of what I was really feeling was that I didn't have a strong sense of belonging. I had moved a lot through my childhood, and I didn't have like a network of friends. So I kept starting at new schools, and I felt really self conscious about the way I dressed. I didn't feel like I belonged. And somehow in my mind, I thought if I just lose enough weight, if I just become skinny enough, then I will fit in and then people are going to value me more. So unfortunately, that led me down a really destructive path, and I ended up hospitalized a few different times for anorexia. And what I found when I did that was that I would always think I was almost close enough to reaching my goal, but it would never be quite enough. And I think that's the nature of body image issues. Is like there's this lie that if we could just look a little bit different, then we would be happy. But really, it doesn't work. So a little bit about what helped me get better. I'm really grateful that I got a good treatment team, a good counselor, doctor, dietitian And so I stabilized, but I still wasn't, in my mind, I still hadn't made the decision to recover for myself. But then I went to a boarding high school, and every week the dean, my dean, who I really liked, would share a health tip. So she would share about something about nutrition or exercise or drinking water, and talk about how we were designed to be well and to flourish. And week after week, I just kept thinking, oh, like this whole eating disorder thing, it's not what I was made for. And there's something better. And I ended up making the decision for myself that I want to recover. And then I did more treatment after that. So I'm really grateful for the recovery I had for several years. Unfortunately, in college, I did struggle with bulimia for a few years, but those same principles came back, and I realized this isn't what I want. And thankfully, with help and with counseling, I was able to get past that again. So it's been about, I think, 9 years since I've had any sort of eating disorder behaviors or symptoms. And I'm just really, really grateful for that. Recovery is so worth it. And I just want to say to anyone who's struggling with disordered eating or eating disorders, it can feel sometimes like I'm never going to get better. This is too messed up. But recovery is absolutely possible. It's well worth it. I love like climbing mountains now, or being able to do things with energy and strength. So I'm very grateful for that. I watched a TED Talk a few years ago that I really, really liked. And the lady was talking about body image, and she said something that I've always remembered. She said, think of your body like an instrument rather than an ornament. So an ornament is like just something we put on the Christmas tree or some decoration, and its sole purpose is just to it's just aesthetic. It's just to look a certain way. It doesn't really have a function. But an instrument is something that it's beautiful. It can be beautiful, but it's also used for something. And one thing that's been helpful to me in my body image recovery is to learn to think about my body as an instrument. Even if I have a body part that I don't necessarily like let's say I don't like, my thighs aren't my favorite part of my body. Well, I'm still so grateful that I have thighs, that I have something to connect my leg to the rest of my body. Or, I might feel self-conscious about my I'm trying to think here, my mouth, the way my mouth is shaped. But I can be grateful that I have a mouth that's able to say kind things or useful things or whatever. So being able to learn to retrain our minds to see our bodies as capable of giving love to people, of capable of making the world a better place. And the most beautiful people, I think, are the people that are actively using their bodies to help beautify the world. So that's been a helpful thing for me. One other fascinating thing for me was learning that there's no such thing as an average body. So in the 1940s, the US Air Force was realizing that they were having all kinds of accidents and mishaps in the planes, and they didn't know what was wrong. Like the pilots were highly skilled, the planes were really well made, and they were having all of these freak accidents. Well, they eventually discovered that it's because the size of the cockpit was off. So the way they had designed the cockpit was they had taken a few hundred pilots and measured their average dimensions, like of their arm length and their leg length, and all of these different measurements of their bodies. And they had designed an average cockpit so that it would help the most pilots to be comfortable. But they thought, well, what do we do wrong? So they ended up serving 4,000 pilots and doing all these different measurements. And then they asked the question, how many of the 4,000 pilots fit the average? Once we average all of these different measurements together, and not a single pilot fit the average. So it's fascinating that there's actually no such thing as an average body. Our world wasn't designed so that any two people would look alike or be alike. And that's been another really important thing to me in my recovery, is the lesson of individuality, that each one of us was made with a unique personality, with a unique skill set, and with a unique body. And the goal is to be the best versions of ourselves, not to compete with one another. And I think that that can also help with body image. The other thing I wanted to share briefly about is shame. And I think that shame drives eating disorders. I know that shame was a huge part of both my experience with anorexia and bulimia. And it brings up this question, where do we get our sense of value? Does my sense of value come from how I look? Because if I think that, then I'm going to work really, really, really hard to look better, to look different. Does my sense of value come from my work? Because if I think that, I'm more likely to struggle with alcoholism, workaholism, that's what I meant to say. So oftentimes when we find ourselves in destructive patterns, in self-defeating behaviors, it's because we have a misplaced sense of value. And ultimately what helped me recover from my eating disorder was, and I'm sharing from my faith background, I know we have people from a wide variety of faith backgrounds, so it's not going to be the same for everyone, but for me, realizing I'm loved not because of what I look like, but because I have a maker who loves me. And I don't want my relationship with myself to be based on mean standards. Just like I don't want my relationship with any of my friends to be based on unrealistic expectations about what they should look like or be like. I don't want my relationship with myself to be like that. And I have found that after testing the theory of does appearance earn love, that it doesn't, and that it's much healthier and worthwhile to invest in friendships as we are imperfect, even with our insecurities, because all of us are valuable and there is no such thing as average. So those are a few of the lessons that I've learned, and thank you for the chance to share.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome. I think it was interesting the way you were talking about how our bodies are meant to have purpose. It's not just as an ornament. And I know a lot of women, especially like me at some points, you think it's all about how you look and that you need to look a certain way for other people. Almost as if like your body provides a service like of enjoyment for other people. And it's like, no, it's like you matter. The things that you do with yourself matter. So I think that was really great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. And I just hope everyone feels encouraged because there's each person is like such a treasure and such a different kind of treasure. And the world needs each person so much. So I think it's really cool when women can recognize their own value.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so next up, we have our doctor, Vanessa Quintana. She's going to be talking about being whole as a woman and just a little bit about Vanessa. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has a doctorate from Loma Linda University, and she actually owns her own private practice. She also teaches full-time as an assistant professor. She's happily married and has 3 young children. She also enjoys providing mental health psychoeducation to churches and communities. So I'm going to bring her on right now. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi.
Hi. So this is Dr. Vanessa Quintana, and she is going to give us our keynote speech.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Michelle, for the invitation, you and the team. I know there's team members behind you that have also been pivotal in putting this together. And it's, I think, something that is so important to be talked about over and over. It's not just one thing that we, have a conversation and we're done. That we continue to do this kind of checking in and debriefing with each other is amazing. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here and just for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. Should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm going to share my screen so that for individuals who are out there who would like to take notes or just take pictures of the screen, anything to kind of get a visual of what we're going to be talking about. That's my purpose with, I'll be able, I'm not able to share my screen, Michelle. What should we do here? I think it's been disabled to participants. Let me know if I'm able to share and we can go from there. But let's get started. So if we're talking about wholeness, and from where I'm at, Loma Linda, that's a very big value here at the university. And I studied here and I work here currently. I teach as an adjunct faculty in Loma Linda. So wholeness is a big deal. We talk about it a lot and we try to incorporate it as much as possible in our practice. So that topic is a little less foreign to me. What I decided to devote my life work to is to brokenness. And this topic of brokenness has stigma behind it. We had Elise talking about the shame, and that is a really big word. And I think that as we talk more about this topic, we're going to be able to normalize and destigmatize the different elements that come inside this topic. And so when I say, here we go. Apologize for the technical difficulties like Michelle was talking about. There we go. As we talk about this topic, we also, we can't talk about one thing without talking about the other. And I've devoted my life to destigmatizing brokenness. And as I deal with individuals and couples and families that are going through really hard situations, I also come upon this sense of we shouldn't be here because we have hope, because we have our faith, because we have our spirituality, because things are going well, because I shouldn't, right? This big quote unquote shouldn't be here, we should be grateful, etc. And so as if that invalidates our experience, and it doesn't, it absolutely doesn't. And I love that Elise was talking about this process with being in a place, a really hard place, a struggling place physically, and she can come out on the other side of that, giving her testimony and uplifting individuals and doing the work of spreading hope. It's possible. I've been there and I've gone through this process. And if I were to have an interview with Elise, which would have been excellent, but if I would, I'm assuming that the conversation would be, I am a different person. We're not going to talk about a better person or a worse person, but I am different. That process has done something to my psyche, has done something to my maturation, has done something to my, my self-identity, so that I'm in a different place and I get to give that meaning. And so women, for the most part, go through that same sort of process. And we start off with the cracks and the fragments, things that happen to us that really causes pain. Suffering is more of a choice. So I'm not going to talk about suffering, but for a lot of women, it is suffering. They're in a place of brokenness, if I could just conceptualize it that way. And they have been treated through life in situations with different things that have left them scarred. And so what is that like? And so many women are going through this. For the most part, 1 in 3 women are going to be going through some sort of trauma. Can you imagine, just in this conversation we're having, like how many of us does that include statistically? If there's 6 of us, I mean, this conversation is super relevant. If it's 12 of it, if it's more, it just keeps getting more and more and more relevant. But what I mean by trauma is abuse, assault, and with abuse, of course, physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse. It's the different categories: situational abuse, intimate terrorism, intimate violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence. Vicarious trauma, how necessary it is to talk about vicarious trauma for healthcare professionals that are in the field, and they see these violent things take place, or they have patients that violent things happen to them. My sister is a pediatrician, and she sees kids coming in all the time, severely abused, or things happen there with the patients that are impactful emotionally. That's vicarious trauma. You don't have to suffer this firsthand for it to be impactful emotionally to your system. And so this vicarious trauma concept in the overall topic of trauma and brokenness is very relevant. Natural disasters, accidents, being in an unsafe sociopolitical environment, all of this causes trauma, and the trauma bleeds over or has comorbidity, or it causes an effect to our mental health. And it's not a surprise that it's going to oftentimes show symptoms of mental illness. It's, I suffered this and I wasn't able to talk about it. I'm not resolving it. And I don't have people that are safe to talk to or to process this with me, or it keeps happening over and over and over again. And suddenly I don't want to talk to anyone. I am withdrawing, and I am thinking about, how purposeless my life is, and I'm burnt out, and I'm exhausted, and I'm tired, and I'm having insomnia, or I'm oversleeping, or I'm having eating disorders to cope with the stress, to cope with the anxiety, or I go into substance use, something to numb my senses, or something to enhance my life, or to give me extra energy. And I go with unhealthy coping mechanisms, and becomes very dysfunctional. It's a cycle, right? Or I'm having this experience and I suddenly develop an ulcer, or I have blurry vision. So that's somatization, where my emotional state is causing my body to start manifesting something that I'm not giving treatment to, I'm not giving enough attention to, and my body will cry out for help. This is the amazing part of who we are as individuals. We're so connected, intimately connected, our mind and our body, that our mind will, if it doesn't get attended to, our mental health doesn't get attended to, then our body will start asking for help. If our body does not get attended to, our mind then joins in and says, I'll help you out, and starts asking for help. This is an amazing way the system works. And so when we see victims of abuse, of life-threatening events or trauma, we see that they often come in as well with physical illnesses. And I'm talking about chronic illnesses, fibromyalgia, or cancer, or migraines, or stomach issues, and digestion issues, constipation, etc. And it could be just a myriad of things depending on your way of processing it or not processing it. It could be like, for me, if I get a lot of stress, I'm not talking necessarily of trauma. When I get very stressed and I don't process that well, and I don't manage it very well, my muscles really start tensing up, and that becomes dysfunctional for me. And it's not like, oh, my neck's starting to hurt, or my muscles are getting really, really tense. I know what that means. I really do. And so there's this cry for help and these symptoms that go hand in hand. And we'll talk a little bit more about the self-awareness of that. Something else that could also be a side effect or a consequence of the trauma that women go through, individuals in general, but just for the sake of today's population topic as women, is relational wounds. So we have these things happen to us, and inadvertently we it hurts our relationships. We are not able to function relationally very well because we're focusing on ourselves, because there's something that hurts. We draw away from people, or we lash out at people, or we bully other individuals, and it's not very intentional. It's like that domino effect of something that hurts us. We vent, we hurt other people, or we cause vicarious trauma, and it's very, very common. So this is what I mean by the cracks and the fragments, this brokenness, this process that really wears us down or takes us down a couple levels, sometimes even down to the floor. It's very impactful and it's very real. I've heard a lot of people minimize the trauma in women and say, oh, that's not traumatic. That's not fair. What is traumatic to someone is valuable, is valid, to be treated as such. Who am I to say that that isn't traumatic, that I would have managed it different, that it would have impacted me different? Has no case here. That person has been affected deeply. And so my compassion gets triggered, my empathy gets triggered, should get triggered. That person's going through something. What are the next steps? What can I do? How can I be there? How can I listen? What do you need? Etc. should be our response, rather than, oh, well, that's not that bad. Or you should have seen what happened to me and look where I'm at. It's very judgmental, very condescending attitude that as a community of women and as a community of individuals, of human beings, it's not helpful. And it's in fact even worse. It can take you to a place of manifesting more mental illness because of the isolation or the discrimination. And so what we should be doing more is what I was talking about in the beginning of saying, tell me more about that. Like, I want to be there for you. Thank you for telling me. I don't know how to respond. This is something that, caught me off guard, but thanks for telling me. I'm right here. I'm listening and I'm present, and we can do this again whenever you need it. It could be as passive, I want to say, although it is very helpful, as that, or hey, listen, let me take you to the shelter, let me take you to a therapist. You say that you needed help with taking care of your kids and cooking here and there, let's get you set up. I don't have to do everything. I can also join hands with other individuals, but I get ahead of myself. This is this piece of brokenness that a lot of us come in to our relationships dealing with, or come into our communities dealing with, and it's so common, it's so incredibly and horribly common. What happens after that? So we do go through these moments, and what next? Like, what is the next step of how human beings respond to brokenness? I would suggest that it's a polishing of sorts. You have a decision, this diversion in a road of selecting behaviors or making decisions that take you through this polishing process, or to this more brokenness. And so more brokenness would be something that you decide you're not getting help for yourself. You're not choosing healthy coping mechanisms. You're not reaching out to people. You're not becoming self-aware of the damage you're inflicting on other individuals, or what you need, how to express it, how to communicate it. Or you're not, doing self-help, so books and reading up on it and identifying it for what it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More so, maybe you're being very passive. But the other road would be, like Elise was talking about, so what does this mean to me? Who am I now that this has happened to me, or that I'm going through this situation? And that's when the polishing takes place. We call it resilience. So resilience in the general term would be an adaptation. This is a process in the face of, yes, situations, hard events, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant stress. Essentially, it's this question that gets thrown at you. What will you do now? How will you take this event, and what will you make of it? So what are the words and the stories you're going to attach to this? And it affects your behavior, it affects your feelings, your behavior, cognition, and your self-identity, and thus and so forth. It keeps going and going. When you get to this process, you do have to realize that although resilience is really important, and it is calling you to adapt and to be flexible, to let yourself kind of like stop controlling the situation as much as this happened to you, and start being more flexible with the opinions that people give or suggestions or the help that you're receiving. It's also something that happens when we're trying to recover from difficult experience. This resilience takes place also on its own. It's not something as proactive sometimes as seeking help, but it's you talking to yourself. It's you meditating on it, or you having these conversations with yourself about it, not so much replaying the situation, but saying, all right, what is next for me? What should I be doing? How am I managing this? Am I mad sometimes, or sad sometimes, or just done with life? Like, what is going on inside, basically? It can lead to profound personal growth. And how amazing that we have this opportunity, that something happened to us, and wow, I got to know myself on this different level. Something that I never thought was going to happen to me, for instance, in having kids and having natural birth, no medication, etc. And I thought, I've never gone through something like this, and I don't know how I'm going to manage it. I don't know how I'm going to cope. And I don't know what this pain is going to mean. And I don't know what I don't know. And so I go through this situation that necessarily wasn't as traumatic, but is very traumatic to your physical, your body. It's really traumatic to your body, and it can be very traumatic emotionally. And I've had a lot of women come in, and I've heard stories and testimonies of a lot of women whose birth of their children have been extremely traumatic. So for sure, this is something that can be counted on. But I went through this process, and I came out the other side, and yes, it hurt so bad, and it was just, this extreme experience. But I was really in tune with, wow, women's bodies are just impressive, and this human being, and I'm emotional just talking about it now. This is how profound, I got into my reflection of it. And there is an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to get to know yourself better. And that's what resilience is about too. You're going through this experience, and while you are going through this experience with yourself, turn around, like turn right beside you, turn inside and say, wow, this is happening right now. And this is how I'm responding, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is how I'm processing things. And I can admire myself, and I could be compassionate with myself, and I could, wow, Vanessa, I never thought you were going to manage it that way. It's like a research. You're being curious, you're being interested, you're observing yourself. You're not letting it happen to you. You're taking control of it now and allowing yourself to learn something deep about who you are. And of course, what you're going to be. And all this really has, it's braided together. It doesn't invalidate your emotional experience. You trying to be resilient isn't, I'm going to forget this happened to me, I'm going to be super positive, I'm just going to say it was amazing. Not at all. No, that's not what this is about. It's not saying I'm so glad this happened to me. Absolutely. And I would never say that to my clients. I'm so glad this happened to you, and have them say, I'm so glad this happened to me, is very unrealistic. Who is happy, that they got severely tortured for years and years by an intimate partner? That really messes us up. It messes with our trust in other individuals. I'm not happy it happened to someone, and I wouldn't be happy if it happened to me. I'm not happy that I have to have kids this way. I'd be so happy if it was any other way of avoiding this much pain. I don't enjoy pain. I don't think that our bodies are created, or we're not wired to respond in that way to suffering and brokenness. So it doesn't invalidate your emotional experience. But what resilience does, then, it does take you to this other opportunity process. And we've been talking about that a little bit. It also is not something innate. It's not something we're born with. We're not born with resiliency. Resiliency is an opportunity we take advantage of, and we work towards. depending on the things that we go through. There are some individuals that have never suffered and have never gone through trauma or hard experiences or extreme significant stress, the things that I've mentioned here in the definition. And I would say, no, resiliency is not something that I would count as their characteristic. They could be a million other things that are amazing, but not resiliency. Resiliency comes from these hardships. This is where resiliency is formed, is created, is bred, and it's not innate. So if you see someone managing a situation admirably or better than you, then you have to recognize that it's because they've gone through something that they've allowed shape them into who you're seeing now, and something that we can learn from, we can talk about. We have these conversations, such as today's topic. And it's also not the absence of stress. Because you're being resilient doesn't mean you're not still facing significant stress, or you're not troubled or preoccupied or concerned about what you're going through and what your life is going to look like. I'll give you an example. An individual who leaves an abusive relationship, and this individual no longer wants this for their relationship, is taking this huge courageous step forward to draw boundaries, and has decided to abandon the relationship, to leave it, to say stop. And that person is going to go through this process of knowledge of self and growth and everything, but where's the money going to come from? Where are they going to live? What are they going to eat tomorrow? How are they going to take care of their kids or dependents? Is that going to be stressful? Absolutely. They're still going through this process. And they are also feeling stress. And they are also managing their stress, and they're also coping with stress. It's an and situation rather than an or situation. Resiliency doesn't mean that you've gone through trauma, but you're better. No, you've gone through trauma and you're recovering and you're trying to get better, and you're also managing stress, and you're also sometimes done, and you're also burnt out, and you're also hopeful, and you're also trying to stay positive. And it's a lot of ands tying together rather than an invalidation of trying to really stop the things that you consider are not helpful or not good. We're trying to moralize it. So we're not trying to take out these experiences. We're really trying to put it together in a way that is understandable and workable and copable. Someone that is facing stress can also get help. For instance, food banks, or connecting to housing, or connecting to loved ones that can take them in. They're going to start realizing that the stress is manageable as they're asking for help, as they're putting these things into practice, as they are talking about it and venting and reflecting and praying for some individuals. So all of this complex process, for lack of a better word, is causing the situation to move forward. Resiliency is not about staying in the same place. You realize that it's starting to trigger mental illness or symptoms, etc. And the question should always be, what do I do now? Like, what's my next step? I'm going to go to a therapist. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to go to a support group. I'm going to reach out to a friend. I'm going to take medication. Or I'm going to take a walk and kind of do the things that I know already really help me. It should also really lead us to proactiveness, to doing something about this. We should never be stagnant and ruminate over and over what happened and how we are and reflecting just on our horrible situation. The more stagnant we are and the more passive we are, the more helpless and powerless we're going to feel. The things are going to be taken from us and out of our control, which ironically triggers more mental illness and more comorbidity of substance use. It's just putting us more at risk. So as we're going through these cracks, these fragments, this polishing opportunity, we're also coming to this last piece, which is reflecting. And what are we reflecting? Like, what is this piece about? Why should this be important? So this has been taken from me, or this has happened to me. why should I be giving anything? And why is it important to give anything? I would suggest, as we're talking about mental health as well as relational health, that we focus on reflecting hope. As Elise was mentioning in her testimony, she could have stayed with her experience and she could have not mentioned it. I'm going to be, putting it out there as an assumption, but she might have felt very nervous about coming on and just talking about this in a public platform. And yet she decided there was something there that was moving her, motivating her to talk about her experience. And she had probably processed it. She had probably gone through this reflective process and come to a point where she said, I have to do something with it. And a lot of people come to this point. I don't want to single her out. A lot of people come to this point where they say, I'm ready. I'm ready to offer my testimony or give hope and motivation to someone else that is going through something like this. And that is hope. That process, that place is hope. Not everybody gets there, and not everybody gets there at the same time. And some people take, different approaches to how they are going to offer hope. Some people don't want to talk about it to anyone else, what happened to them, but they're willing to pay it forward, paying therapy appointments for other individuals who are struggling with similar issues, or giving a stipend, or volunteering at a shelter, or advocating for people, motivating them to go, even if they don't have to share their experience, they're really kind of in the background. Even putting events together like this, for instance, which would be a great example. So hope comes in so many forms and ways. And as human beings, we need hope for everything that we do. In fact, motivation is rooted in hope. We can never move to act on anything if we don't have hope that it will be beneficial to us. So as you see, hope is a really elemental piece to anything we do in life, to any behavior that we do. If you're asking yourself, why haven't I gotten off the couch in a year? Why haven't I gotten to do these hobbies that I really want to do? Why haven't I started on my New Year's resolutions? Why haven't I treated my kids better? Why haven't I gone to couples therapy? All these things that you're kind of stuck with, that you haven't changed how you want to change. Or these things that you haven't really processed, that you've let go, put in the back of your mind because you don't want to deal with them. You're asking yourself why, big why question. I would say that it's because you haven't found hope that things can get better, or that you working through them, putting in all that effort to do something will get you in a better place. We're really being honest and reflective about it. We have to realize that we have to start there. We really have to start at this place where it's not so much of criticizing yourself because you haven't changed this, or because you aren't feeling better after years of treatment or whatever. It's probably because there's one piece missing. Why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? What do I have to look forward to once I am in that place I want to be in? Maybe it's time to quit the solution that you thought was going to work because it's not, and try something different. And as you try that different thing, it's going to lead to a hopeful stance. I do feel a little better. A couple of weeks ago, I'd been feeling so fatigued and just really burnt out. And I just can't mention it. Like when you have so many things on your plate, as a professional, as a woman, as a partner, as a mother, just tons of things. And I don't have time to be grouchy, I don't have time to be exhausted. I really need to count on my body to do what I need it to do, which is just function. Okay, just stay awake until 8 or 9 when I can crash. But during the day, can you just work with me? That's what I feel like telling my body sometimes. Help me out here. Like, focus, concentrate. I don't want to be lashing out at my kids. I don't want to be snappy at them. I don't want to be irritable. I just want to work. Come on. And so I came to that place last week where I was just done. I'm like, I just feel so impatient. I hate feeling like I'm just going from hour to hour to survive. So I mentioned this to someone and I said, I need a way to get energy into me without drinking coffee or taking an energy drink because that's something that is not harmful to me because of a physical condition that I have. And so I was really looking for a different way of doing things. And that person suggested this amazing, kind of energetic supplement that is plant-based, etc. I was like, yes, I will try it. I will try anything. I went and did my research. And so I was responsible about seeing if it would fit me and etc. And it did, and I got it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can do this. And I was starting to do my juices a little bit more, and I started to get motivated. So if I was doing this one thing, then it led me to wanting to do this other thing and this other thing, to where today my daughter had a meltdown in the morning and I connected with her. And this is one of the points of hope. And I told her, you know what? Let's just take a step back. Like, what would work with you? What would help you? I see that you're upset. I see that you're just really not in a good place. And of course, in my mind, it's like, I'm not going to punish her. Like, why would I punish her for having this internal experience that is very confusing for her? I want to help her through it. And so as I was trying to connect and engage with her, we came up with this solution of getting into the bathing suits and going into the bathtub and putting like essential oils in and playing around and just talking. And she loved this. She's 4, okay, mind you, she's 4 years old, and she found this amazing way to cope with whatever was going on with her. And I'm not saying that it was traumatic, because some individuals, it's not as simple as going into a bubble bath with someone, of course not. But it's finding a solution. And as we did that, she said, I feel better, Mom. I feel better. And it was just joy to my heart. I felt so happy for her that she was able to recognize and acknowledge that this was a process she had gone through to help herself. And when that happened, she's like, can I paint? I'm like, yeah, let's get your paints out. And so she took her paints out. And then, and we were like, I said, do you want to make cookies? And so, yeah, let's make cookies. One thing leads to another. When you have found hope, even if it's a tiny little grain of it or a beam of it, it tends to motivate you to keep looking for it, to keep doing things to improve, because I have this new story that something's worked. I'm not in this black place. Something worked. And if I continue, it's going to gradually help me breathe, get better, get me to a higher place, get me to a better standing, reflection, whatever word that you want to put there. So one of the important pieces of hope is connection. And what is connection? It's reaching out to someone. It's saying, I need help. I am drowning. I can't do this. I have all this responsibility on me. I know that this is what I have to do, but time out. I haven't really dealt with this, and I'm just surviving, and I'm just dealing with it, and I'm trying to breathe, and I really need to go into treatment. I really need to have like a retreat with myself. I needed to take a step back. I need to quit my job, like whatever it is that you need to reach out and express yourself and communicate what you need is going to be pivotal. And we can't do this alone. We reach out to people, we reach out to our faith, our community. We have to do this process of voicing it, and it really has to come out in a very clear way, whether that be behaviorally or verbally, because that's also me telling myself, I'm willing to advocate for you. This happened to you, and I wasn't there to do it before. I wasn't able to do it before, but I have a stronger voice now, and I will speak up, and I got you. Like if I'm talking to myself, I got you, Vanessa. Sorry about everything before, but that's it. Like I'm not going to be that person. I am going to be a person who stands up for you, for what happened to you, and for that, wounded part of you, that fragment. I got your back. It feels really good to be able to tell that to yourself by reaching out to someone else. Engaging is also really important. It's a continuous process. It's not just reaching out once and saying, all right, did my piece, taking a step back now. It's a continuous, did this work? Did it not? I'm going to come back. It's connecting with people and checking up with them. It's hearing their stories too, as well as them hearing yours. It's a give and take, a reciprocal process. It's going to lead you to feel hopeful. Something else is wellness. Wellness also gets you in a better place. If you're body is broken down because of what's been going on emotionally, then start with the broken down physical part. Start getting yourself in a better place physically. Like I mentioned with one of my solutions that I put in place, I do feel so much energy. I do feel just cognitively sharper, etc. So yes, I'm feeling better with myself. I'm feeling more patient. I'm feeling more compassionate. I'm feeling willing. How hard it is. Something just feel willing to do something. I have to force myself to it, and I feel willing. So you see, like really touching base with myself physically is going to give a domino effect. It's going to feed into my emotional well-being. So wellness, if it's really difficult to start with your physical system, start with your emotional system. Give yourself time and space, and give yourself a healthy relationship. Don't get involved in toxic relationships. Draw boundaries and express yourself and communicate. And I'm biased, I keep saying this, but start therapy, or start a support group, or listen to a talk or a sermon, or read a book. Start there, which might lead to physical wellness, and then that supports, that offers you hope. Wow, I'm not having these migraines. I'm not going through so much insomnia, etc., etc. Reaching out to a physician or a wellness coach, etc. Positive thought. I can't be more clear than that. How important it is that we manage and watch our thoughts. The words we say to ourselves are so important in offering hope or in destroying our hope. I could have told myself, you're a bad mother. You are continuously irritable with your children. You are a bad mother. And if you're a bad mother, that means you're a bad therapist as well. Like, who wants a therapist that is being super incongruent with their parenting? Nobody. You're telling these parents to do these things, and you're teaching them skills, and you're coming back and you're not applying this, and that breaks us further. We're already dealing with this trauma and this suffering, and we're putting this shame on ourselves. And we had that word also, the conversation with Elise, is that shame leads us nowhere. It leads us nowhere. I take that all back. It does lead us somewhere. It leads us down, in a worse place that we were at, and it's not productive. Positive thought, however, does eliminate these self-deprecating behaviors and this self-criticism, and it offers an opportunity to see yourself in a different light. It's saying, got it, that happened. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. I can't do something different. I take ownership and responsibility of what is in my control, and I move forward. With an individual, for instance, who has had a traumatic experience, and they've been sexually abused, for instance, it's not going to be fair that that person says, I put myself there. It's my fault because this is how I was dressing and this is what I was doing. Because it's inaccurate. Something happened to you and it should not have happened to you. It's your right to be in a safe world. And that's, ultimately what we want, is to be in a safe world where no matter, the situation and the circumstances, we can walk safely as women where we need to walk. Hello, like, this isn't about blaming the victim. It's acknowledging that this happened to you. And then there's a positive thought attached to that, where I'm going to offer myself space for compassion, and I'm going to be righteously angry that this happens to women and that this happened to myself. And thus, it's going to lead me to a place where I'm going to do something different. This isn't going to happen to me again. This isn't going to happen to people in my watch. I'm going to raise my daughter and my son differently so that they're not, recreating this horrible social pattern that we're dealing with blaming the victim and empowering the perpetrator, or very little consequences and entitlement for perpetrators, etc. So you do something that empowers you to take control and to see things differently. And this is where positive thought comes in. It's not necessarily, I'm going to see things, pink and rosy, and I'm going to, pretend that nothing's wrong. Absolutely not. It's about empowerment and narratives that lead us to growth. Yeah. Stories that we can tell ourselves that lead us to a better place. And purpose. Purpose, I think, is going to be essential with situations, traumatic situations can really rob us of purpose. If something were to happen to me, for instance, in my practice, and I had a client who was who was escalated and assaulted me, and I had a life-threatening event, and I have PTSD, I have post-traumatic stress disorder for it, or anxiety or depression, and that leads me to a very dark place, and I might be just very hopeless that I can go back into practice and that I can do what I feel safe with my clients again. And I really have to put all these things in place so that I can function. And ironically, it's even giving me more stress having to have a panic button and having to like screen clients and everything. This purpose piece is going to be essential because while it might be difficult to get to a place of wellness and positive thought, purpose is something that you can set in place that could really jumpstart it for you. So what was it about therapy that was inspiring at the beginning? That was, triggering passion in me. Why? Why did I do therapy in the first place? And so when I take myself back into my values and my beliefs and like the core of who I am, I reconnect. I reconnect with me and I reconnect with my purpose. And I might shift. There might be a part of me that says, you know what? I'm done with this part of it. I'm not going to be, a therapist to everyone. I'm going to have a niche, and I'm going to go into seeing women who have had, traumatic experiences. And I might be, really taking this space and time and allowing myself to go in a different direction purpose-wise, but I'm not losing purpose. I'm not standing back and saying my life has no purpose anymore, because that is really destructive and that will really kill your hope. Who am I as an individual? What is my purpose? Do I even have a purpose in this world? My life is, nobody will care if I'm not here. These suicidal kind of ideation will lead you down a really dark path, and hope goes, like it lights off. Purpose, however, will take you from one place to the other. You're doing something that reignites your passion, that reignites your hope in that your life is meaningful, is valuable. You can give good things to your relationship and not end up in a relationship that is abusive. You deserve better, etc., etc., etc. I can have a parental experience that is positive, regardless of what's happened to me in the past. I am in a different place. So I want to draw this together by talking about the prism. The prism is one of the most beautiful pieces that we have in reflecting light. And we wouldn't be able to see this myriad of colors, this beautiful spectrum of colors that we see, had the prisms not had these cracks and these broken pieces. The prism must be shaped. It must be broken, and then it goes through a polishing process that gets it to reflect light. Prism is an incredible reminder that what happened to you can lead you to reflect hope, can lead you to reflect happiness and love towards other individuals and towards yourself. These lights that you see here on the screen would not be there if this was a one-sided crystal or glass. It doesn't happen that way. It needs the edges and the angles to be able to reflect light in this way. And so because it's a process of resiliency, it didn't get broken into powder. It's really this polishing process that you're allowing to take place in your life, that this can happen. So how much can we learn from what we've gone through is really up to you. How much can we reflect light is really up to you. There's some prisms that only reflect certain spectrums of light. There's some that reflect a ton of them. You'll decide that. You'll be a beautiful piece in yourself if the trauma that you've faced becomes an opportunity for reflection. Now, it might be that some of you that are listening are more introverted and you're saying, well, I don't want to just spread my light everywhere, but I want to be able to reflect back into myself, hope and energy and love. And I want to be a better individual, someone that just inspires by the life I live, not so much by everything that I'm, talking or doing or writing. And that's okay too. You can reflect back into your life and your loved ones and your community and system that you're surrounded by. You can reflect goodness and love, and that will be enough because you are enough. The prism is enough, no matter how small. Diamonds are just tiny, and they have this same concept in it. Tiny things are so valuable, as well as big ornaments. So woman that is listening, you that is listening to this woman, the beautiful piece, beautiful prism that you are, if you, whatever stage that you are in this process, allow yourself to reflect on what needs to happen next, so that your life, if it is not there, can be a reflection that makes you feel satisfied, and that has the people around you also learning and growing and inspired. I think that that's just a beautiful place to be, that as women and in a community that we can inspire other women, the next generation or the current generation or future generation, the generation before us, to give good news. And the good news is that we don't have to be where we are and stay where we are and be victims of what happened. So thank you, Michelle. That was my piece here. And for those of you who are wanting to tie this into the Bible, I would really encourage Isaiah 61:1 for a self-reflection, for those of you who want to take it further into a spiritual reflection.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was really nice. I've never heard the metaphor of the prism before. That was really awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I know a lot of us, we do want to reflect that light and to bring hope to other people. So it's a really great goal to strive for. So we're gonna start with our Q&A. So we have Lejone with us, and she is going to be moderating the questions that we received from people. Just to give you a quick bio of Lejone. After working as an adjunct counselor and educator for nearly 20 years, Lejone founded Broken Beautiful, a brand for the broke, broken, and those for whom the struggle is real. Pizza, prayer, and Pilates are the great loves in her life. Lejone also enjoys facilitating life groups, life skills classes in prisons, and enjoys alongside those who are trying to navigate the broken roads leading to a purpose-filled life. I'm wearing her shirt right now. Just want to say that. But yeah, so go ahead and moderate these questions.
I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Quintana. That was just so timely, and given that it is Women's History Month, so many women have gone through trauma. You mentioned 1 in 3. A lot of times that trauma is, unhealed or unaddressed, right? I also appreciate that you said, we shouldn't minimize someone else's trauma. We also shouldn't minimize our own. You mentioned a lot of times women just want to keep pushing through, given the things that they've gone through, but a lot of times not really stopping, like you said, to reflect and to pause and to say, okay, allow it to polish us, to make that prism. That was absolutely beautiful. And so if you guys we do have some really great questions. Should I start with the softball or go with the heavy hitters? Start.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so if you are dealing with an abusive or toxic relationship, how do you work on yourself when you have someone in your life that tears you down?
And this is where it becomes complicated, to give blanketed advice where that person's life is so complex. Like it's not fair to say, draw boundaries, get out of the relationship. It's not that easy. It would be so unrealistic and unhuman to assume that it's a simple solution for such a complex problem. Some of us are not in a position to do that. We are very much connected to this relationship. So how do I heal myself? How do I go through this process of healing and recovery when there's constant jabs and there's constant torture and there's constant pain? And I think that I can only say like beginning pieces of it, because it's not something that, I would be a millionaire if I got the answer to this, but I think it starts with, what can you control? What is in your control to change? And make a list of it. Is it maybe a thought process? Is it how you behave to those around you, your children, or your loved ones, etc.? And then how much empathy do I have for this individual who is broken and breaking at the same time? So this person who's being abusive, what do they need? I really want to be careful in how I say this, because it's not your responsibility to heal someone else. It's not essential for your relationship to get better that you're doing something, and it's not your fault that this is happening, and something that you're missing. But if you really want something practical, it's open up the empathy space. Does that person need something that I can provide within my boundaries of a healthy relationship? Can I listen? Can I understand what happened to that person to be where they are? And could I suggest something? Individual therapy, for instance, is that person open to it? There's relationships where it's absolutely closed. A person who does not want help, does not think that they need help, and that sees this as normal. This is what people have to go through. And I've heard that very often. This is how, women should be treated because they're XYZ. And I think that's very horrible, to be in a situation that you're both stuck and that you are receiving this treatment. And so for that, I would say connect to women who are going through similar situations, connect to help that can get you to a different place. And this conversation that we're having today is a good step forward, raising awareness that it's not something that you have to go through, and it's not something that is good to go through. It's not normal to go through this. You do have the right to a healthy and safe relationship, and then the steps after that, are just numerous. You're muted, LJ.
I love that during your talk, you mentioned that a lot of times with the connecting comes expressing and communicating. And when we don't have the voice to do it, we need advocates. We need other voices to speak up
Exactly.
for us. Yeah. Okay, we'll do a softball. What are some specific things that I can do to practice self-care during this pandemic?
During the pandemic, what a beautifully timed question. I think that there needs to be a routine in our lives. The pandemic has taken every sense of normalcy and routine out of it. And when we are set to function as human beings in a certain way, I think that situational, impromptu, like spontaneous change is not too bad. But when it's continuous and chronic, like it has been, it really messes with us. We start like feeling like everything's falling away and nothing feels normal. And that really affects us emotionally and thus physically. So some of us are gaining weight, or some of us are stopping our exercise routine, or some of us are staying up way too late watching things, or getting up really late because we don't have motivation, or things got canceled or moved, or we're in our PJs all day, or bottom half is sweats or whatever, or we're not getting out at all, or reading, or whatever it is. I think a routine is really important to reestablish. Get back to doing something that feels normal for you. It's not going to be the same for everyone, but, you know, have a time to wake up, have a time to have lunch and eat right, and then have a time to go to bed. Even if it means, you know, nobody's going to see me the whole day. And why should I even change out of my pajamas? Why should I even get ready? Why should I do my hair? For you. And what better motive and reason for you, because you need it, because we need it as human beings and as women. We need to feel good about ourselves. We need to love ourselves and love who we see and who we're with. You are your partner through this pandemic. You are your most intimate presence in this pandemic. And if you are not okay, then you're going to feel horrible through it. You're not going to become resilient. You're going to be a victim or a passive spectator of what is happening to us. It's going to leave you horribly messed up. Once all this kind of wants to go back to normal, you're really going to feel like you're in the dust. While some people are picking up and doing something through the process, you're really having to catch up. So start with that, make a routine, have a schedule, and of course, we're leaving a lot open to whatever happens, but through that also have this resiliency process that we've talked about. What can I do? How can I grow? What can I learn about myself? For me, it's been practicing new things. Guys, I got out my sewing machine through this. And I know a lot of people have gone into hobbies and doing things like this, but that was huge for me because I'm so stretched to many different limits. And when I got my sewing machine and I learned that I'm horrible at sewing and whatever, I had a lot of compassion. I said, okay, fine. I had to make a pillow for my son and I got it done. Like my expectations were low. I got it done and I moved forward. So there's also that, be flexible, but also set expectations realistically.
I love that. And I think also you tried E for effort, right? Like,
so I give you, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, sometimes it's all we get. It also ties into what you were talking about with motivation, because we have to, you know, want to make a change, right? But sometimes we just haven't found what you said was hope. And so someone asked the question, I feel like I'm in an emotional rut and I have no motivation to change. So how do I bring myself to a place mentally where it can really start to make a difference?
Wow, this is such an important question. I think if we spent like our whole time talking about this, like it would not be, you know, enough to completely cover it. It's such an important question. Like Michelle we got to focus on making this a topic for another time. But if you notice that emotionally you're not catching up to yourself, and your motivation's just not there, you're like, and we call this anhedonia, where you just don't have the drive, the pleasure, or the interest of doing things that used to be interesting to you and pleasurable, then we really got to take a step back. What is usually going on is that our needs aren't being met. So every motivation, every behavior is taken back to a need. And if that's a dysfunctional behavior, and we say that maybe sometimes a behavior that isn't good, and let's give an example, eating junk food, something like that isn't helping you at all, is making you feel horrible, but you're craving it, for instance. Let's take it back to a need. What need is being met? And we talk about 5 basic needs: the physical needs, love, safety, and self-esteem, and then self-actualization. And so one of these 5 needs is being met by eating junk food. And maybe I'm feeling satiated, or maybe it's comfort food. Let's draw on that same need a different behavior. So if my need right now through the pandemic or through this horrible thing that I'm going through, and I'm trying to cope by feeling a same sense of safety, I'm eating junk food, well, what else could I, put in there so that it could still get me a sense of safety? What if it's reconnecting with an old friend that I used to have so much fun with? What if it's having a conversation with someone every night? Or I am eating something that's delicious and healthy at the same time. What if it's taking a walk? What if another behavior that is still, meeting that need that is triggered by that situation? So for some of you that feel just emotionally just not there, like, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to log in, I don't want to, study, I just don't want to be present for people. I want to withdraw and do nothing but watch TV. It really has to go back, evaluate that your body and your mind are intimately connected. What you do for your body is going to affect your mind. So don't work against yourself. If you're feeling emotionally down, don't put yourself physically in a situation that's going to make it harder. Feed yourself the right things, do exercise, and it's going to eventually fit into this. This is really hard because you don't have the motivation to exercise, to feed yourself, to whatever. But guess what? You're the boss of you. You're in control. Yes, your frontal lobe is still in control. It's still up and running. It's still active. You can still override your emotional desires, however destructive they may be. So start with a physical thing and be a little bit more compassionate with emotional, which will catch up. However, if you feel like I'm here, I'm listening, but I'm so distracted. Like I'm trying to connect with classes and work, etc., but my mind's just not there. I'm feeling so burnt out. Come back to these need things. There's something that you're needing that you're not getting. Is it enough sleep? Is it time? Is it a conversation with a loved one? Is it intimacy? Is it safety? Is it purpose? Why am I studying this? Why am I in this class? Why am I in this job? Like, do you need to reconnect back to your purpose? Maybe it's self-esteem. I feel horrible about myself day in, day out. Like I do all of these things that don't make me feel good about myself. And then, I reflect with people who are commenting on it, etc. That is super crucial, that you come back to these needs and that you reflect. So what can I do for self-care? Oh my goodness, like let's go a little bit more into the root of the problem instead of, having, because I could easily say, oh yeah, so, like my daughter, take a bubble bath, read a book, do something that feels good. But what if those things are really not addressing the root issue, that I'm feeling unsafe? What's going to happen tomorrow when I can't pay my rent? What if the clients don't come anymore? What if I get fired? What, you're worried. You need a sense of safety. So what can you do? Do you need to have a conversation with your boss? Do you need to talk to someone that gives you, cheaper housing? Do you need to apply for something for EBT? Do you need to go to a food bank to be able to get food and then thus, rebudget, etc.? So whatever it is, I think also having a therapist is really good for emotional support. So LJ, I know, and I'm just going to stop myself there because I'm super triggered by this question into going deeper, but those are just brushstrokes of some ideas that we can give out. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned self-care. It's so important. You've already touched on this. So people have been self-medicating, especially, during this pandemic, it's become really prevalent. So when dealing with addiction, this is another question. What is a good first step to take in order to overcome it?
An addiction will be a dysfunctional coping mechanism. And we have to be really compassionate about the fact that an addiction is an illness. And it's not like, oh, cold turkey, stop because you're not strong enough. Absolutely not. There's so much compassion that goes into it. And this recovery process it's very complex. So when there is self-medication taking place, etc., don't focus on reducing or eliminating or stopping this addiction as much as it is going back, like I mentioned, to what is this giving me? Is what I need to be numb or to be disinhibited or to just go to sleep every night or to forget the fact that, that I'm losing all these things or that losing my job or whatever. Sense of safety, belonging, love, connection, physical, like it just tastes good. And I just keep doing something because it tastes good. Well, a lot of things taste good. Some of them are not good for your body and some of them are. So come back to this principal issue and focus on how you can manage this, how you can talk about this, express it, connect with someone. And then the symptoms of it, which oftentimes lead to addictions for people, will become easier to track, will become easier to manage and resolve if you're emotionally getting your needs met. So let's have compassion for individuals that are self-medicating, because this is a horribly difficult situation. When is our stimulus payments going to come in? Like how hard is it to be in a position where you're losing these things or you're not doing what felt good before, and this does. Okay. time out, go back, and let's see if we can readjust and adapt and learn something that also gets me that pleasure feeling. Your brain is really a set of synapses. It's just, neurotransmitters going off. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the pleasure it gets from a substance and the pleasure it gets from sex, for instance, or the pleasure it gets from food. It's pleasure. It triggers the pleasure sensors. So you can rewire your brain to associate healthy pleasure and to want it and to need it. You ask people who have had a long lifestyle of being vegan, you're like, how do you do without cheese? And how do you do without this? They've rewired their brain. They do crave their greens. They do crave their fruit. They do crave these meals that are, delicious to them and wholesome. And they've gotten to a place. That's just an excellent example of we can rewire our brains, and substance abuse being one of those things that needs extra help and it needs extra treatment for. But going back to the same concept is also very hopeful. We can be hopeful that it's something that we can treat and that we don't have to live with.
That's awesome. Our final question is spirituality important when it comes to finding wholeness? And what part does it play?
It absolutely is. I think that it's a huge part because it's in our model, in our wholeness model. It's one of the pieces, our relational health, our spiritual health, our physical health, our emotional health, et cetera, et cetera. I think it really plays a big piece. And for some individuals, this is an important concept. It's a protective factor. If you are connected spiritually, if you have spiritual health, the stronger you are spiritually, the less risk you have to dysfunctional coping, to mental illness, to substance use, to everything kind of that we've mentioned that is at risk, right? To suicidal ideation, to hopelessness and things like that. So it does play a huge piece in protecting us. And then when we have gone through something and let's just say that, yeah, we received this trauma or this life-threatening event, that if we increase or improve or strengthen our spiritual life, or we're connected back to our spiritual community, that we are going to recover quicker. It grounds us. Yeah.
It's so good. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Quintana. This was so helpful.
Pleasure.
It's amazing. And thank you for all of you who submitted your questions. If you enjoyed participating in this event and you'd like more resources, please feel free to contact us at famgrowth@gmail.com. So FAMGROWTH@gmail.com. We're so happy that you guys made the time to be here today. And again, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Michelle, for making this possible.